This is Katar Hol, Hawkman, and today I'm going to tell you how he works in my DC cinematic universe. Over 2,000 years ago, Katar Hol of the planet Thanagar was one of the very first astronauts to test out that planet's warp speed engines. He got all dolled up in his ceremonial Thanagarian armor, got in his ship, and took off into the stars. Unfortunately, his pod had a catastrophic failure. He lost all guidance, the engines cut out, and he crashed into a primitive budding world, Earth. He crashed just outside what would become Cairo, Egypt, where he was immediately found by the Egyptian pantheon. Osiris, his wife at the time, Isis, a handful of their metahuman children, Nabu, aka Destiny, a member of the Endless, Nabu's son, Mamaragon, aka the wizard Shazam, and Anubis, aka Death of the Endless. The pantheon sympathized with his plight, and they welcomed him to join. He was a powerful being from the stars from a vastly technologically advanced planet. His guidance could help the world greatly, and so he was welcomed into their family and given the name Horus. Katar Hol, like many Thanagarians, had an eye tattoo, this one specifically covering his right eye, the Eye of Horus. On the planet Thanagar, think of it as the equivalent of the Superman S shield. It was a way to tell that he was a member of the House of Hol. As a soldier and an astronaut, he eventually gained the title of the God of War of the Egyptian pantheon. He was the most tactile, he was the most savage, he was the most brutal of all of them. But despite his rough demeanor, he was a force for good. But even after all of that, he still met his end. Punched through the chest by Black Adam, a man he helped mentor. And as Katar lay dying in the sands, his friend Anubis came up to him. You see, over the decades that he'd been living on Earth by that time, he and Anubis had gotten really close, like best friend levels of close. In fact, they were so close that her eye tattoo that she has was actually inspired by Katar. She thought that the story and meaning behind the eye tattoo that Katar had was so beautiful that she decided to give one to herself. And as a nigh omnipotent being and the incarnation of death, when her best friend died, she didn't just stand by and do nothing. Now, she doesn't have the power to bring people back from the dead, but what she could do instead was make sure that his soul lived on. And thus we get the Hawkman reincarnation cycle. Every now and then a human is born with his soul, and eventually the memories come flooding back to this person, and they become Hawkman. And again, because death is a nigh omnipotent being, whenever they regain their full memories of their previous lives, they grow a pair of mystical wings. Yeah, I'm getting rid of the nth metal wings. I'm keeping the nth metal armor. I've never liked that the wings were just made out of metal and they weren't cybernetic in some way. I'm scrapping that. Magic wings, nth metal armor. Eventually, he was reincarnated as an archaeologist helping Kent Nelson in Egypt in the early 1930s, and on a very prolific dig found in unison the Helm of Fate and the Armor of Horus. And working together, those two eventually joined the United States military to fight in World War II against the Nazis. They showed the government their power, and they were assigned to the Special Task Force X, an entire platoon of superpowered individuals. And after the war, that platoon would stick together, a camaraderie forged in battle, and they would become the Justice Society of America.